Welcome to this session on inclusive workplaces. My name is Rebecca Jones, Dysart & Jones Associates, and I'm delighted that you are joining us. And I'm also delighted that my two colleagues are going to be speaking with me about a really important topic that I asked Jane to let us talk about. I want to introduce Jamie Lynn and Shailoo Bedi, who are my colleagues through other parts of my life and who I invited, and they accepted to talk with me. Jamie?
I'm Jamie Lynn. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am speaking to you today from the land of the Kumeyaay, which is commonly known as San Diego. I work for ATLA, the American Theological Library Association, as their Education and Professional Development Manager.
Hi everybody, I'm Shailoo Bedi. I live in Victoria, British Columbia, on the Lekwungen and Senchathans traditional territories. I've been a grateful visitor here since 1973 when I immigrated from India. I work for the University of Victoria, and it's a pleasure to be part of this panel with Rebecca and Jamie Lynn. My definition of inclusion is acceptance and belonging. It's not about just representation or numbers or filling certain positions based on diverse ways of being, but it's truly accepting and offering a place for belonging for all the different ways in which we may present in different ways, whether that is ethnic, cultural, religious, racial, socioeconomic, abilities. So those are physical. Those are all the ways in which I think sometimes just surfacely we can present with difference. It's creating an environment in which belonging and acceptance can result, and that piece of us that creates that difference has a place to be.
To include doesn't necessarily mean belonging, but it invites belonging. So it's sort of it's an invitation to, or a beginning of belonging. And when put in the context of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think it's the feelings side of that. I think diversity really talks to numbers and representation. Equity refers to, I think, more power relations, dynamics, and resources. And then inclusion is, how do we feel about all of this? You know, are we a part of something? Are we a part of something greater?
To me, inclusivity is inclusive of all thinking types, many of which we may not agree with. It's not just about racial or cultural differences, commonalities, etc. It's about physical. It's about every different way that we each show up. And understanding that we need to unlearn some of our ways of thinking. And I also asked you to, because we are each of a different generation. We are each in different areas of a huge two countries, but also we are each engaged in different type of work. So we may stem from the same profession, but we've been brought up very differently, and yet to me, we are inclusive because we accept each other and learn of each other, which is what an inclusive workplace to me is about. We go through that discomfort, realizing that we have to wade through that discomfort, muck, if you like, to understand what it feels like and get somewhere together, like help each other out of the muck. Well, maybe you two aren't in the muck, but I'm always in the muck. So that's why I proposed it. I didn't want people to think it's everywhere right now, and that it is not about a workshop. It's not even about a reading and a case study. It's all of those things, but it's mostly about starting with ourselves and whatever that starting point may be, and whatever the end point is that we think we want, it won't be. It's like a mirage, just keeps going on. Because the deeper you go, the more you find out.
Yeah, and I would just add to say that inclusion definitely starts with ourselves, and it's what we can bring to this conversation of diversity and equity inclusion from a personal perspective, but that also, you know, it does not exist outside of the system, and the system is very unjust. So for instance, I'm happy and willing to talk with somebody who, for instance, has been witnessing everything that's been going on in the last 6 months and says, wow, this is like, I'm so moved by this. I want to learn more. I'm realizing now how I've perpetuated things, or things have, you know, my mind is open and I want to learn more, and I'm not really sure what to do or how to start. I'm willing to talk with someone like that. I think, and somebody who says, you know, this is somebody who is unable to see that what is happening is the result of centuries of injustice, and who is upholding a society that, you know, that has, by its very laws and application of them, select application of them, is designed to, you know, uplift a certain type of person and put down the other. I think as long as someone is willing to communicate with me and leave some of our unconscious biases and our cognitive biases behind, I think that then I can have that conversation. I don't know. Yeah, Shailoo, what do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think it takes a tremendous amount of work, and I guess I'm not convinced that training around implicit bias actually changes our actions. So we may slowly become aware through those quantifiable testings, like Harvard has numerous different types of tests that you can do around seeing that you have a bias. That's great. That's step one. To do nothing about that is the problem for me, the accountability piece. That now that I'm aware, what do I plan to do with that knowledge? Now that I'm aware that our society is changing, it needs to change. We now know the structural issues. Things are coming to the surface. What do I need to now do to engage with that, so that I'm not just the bystander watching this happen and think it doesn't impact me, therefore I don't need to get involved in it? What is my next step around the unlearning and learning something new?
So I wanted to build on what you were saying, Shailoo, and go back to Jamie's comment that she may not be comfortable in talking with someone who is not ready, is not at that place to open up. I find that I learn the most by talking with people who are diametrically opposed to my viewpoint. I have to learn from them. That means, you know, in my work, I do conflict management. So I have learned to keep breathing and to truly actively listen, because I am fascinated by their thinking. And if I don't understand their thinking, I can't expect them to start to understand my thinking, right? There has to be there's a wonderful, you know, thing that if you disagree and you just keep pushing at each other, neither one of you is going to go anywhere. But if you in fact just give in so that you can immerse yourself in what they believe, how they got to those beliefs, what it is in those beliefs that adds to them, whether or not it's like you're talking to somebody who, I actually stayed at an ophthalmologist appointment when my ailment that I have, my dystonia, was at its worst. So my head was completely turned this way. These muscles were huge and it was shaking, shaking, shaking. He looks at me and he says, "Are you a heavy smoker?" And I said, "No." Breathe, breathe, breathe. Trying to hold my head so he can look at my eyes. "Well, you must be a heavy drinker." Breathe, 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 right? Or do you just have a psychiatric ailment that your head's doing that? Breathe, breathe, breathe. I had to get through that appointment because I needed something from him. I realized, you know, through all of that, that how different people look at things based on what they know and don't know. That's a doctor, for God's sake, and who framed me as a heavy smoker, alcoholic, psychiatric, you know, patient that needed a great deal of help. And so why do I tell you that? I tell you that because it all adds up to how people look at the world through what they know. And if they don't know anything else, and no one's ever been patient to invite them into another understanding, then we'll constantly be like this. And I don't mean the prayer type. I mean pushing against each other.
That power dynamic, though, of your doctor saying that to you and dismissing your concerns just like that, I think that is an interesting example, because in this situation, you know, this doctor could make life and death medical decisions that relate to you. And if they don't have your best interest in mind because they already have a presupposed idea of who you are, that's a problem. And I say too, for talking with someone with diametrically opposed opinions, I think that is the privilege and also the duty, the responsibility of white allies to do this, because I can't be talking to somebody who believes in white racial superiority, who doesn't really see me as fully human, you know.
Right.
And maybe, you know, maybe I'm okay because I'm model minority. Maybe I'm okay, but other people, those people, you know, it's like, no, I can't. That kind of dynamic is not one that I have any desire to put myself, willingly put myself into. It is a, you know, a protection. And again, I have to say too that I realize that, you know, as an East Asian female too, that I do have certain privileges in our society that other people of color do not, especially Black people and Indigenous people. And so it may be because, and you know, and I've been raised in this society too, I'm a product of it. And so it may be because of this level of privilege that I have, and also the understanding that I have as a person of color, that I feel that I can be more of a bridge in these sorts of discussions. And then you even more so on another, you know, further along that bridge.
I think we do have to record how we each met, right? And how that has added to our ability to have this conversation. Okay? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So Rebecca and I met at the about a year ago at the SLA annual conference in Cleveland, and I had left the opening keynote because it really bothered me. He was a white, wealthy British man who traveled the world with a camera crew and was presenting a message of kindness, like be kind to everybody. But what disturbed me so much was that it was the white savior kind of kindness, especially since he was using a lot of people of color in his kind gestures. And of course he was filming it and making money off of it too. And the entire time I sat in the auditorium, my anxiety started rising, and I said, I need to leave. So I got up and I left the auditorium, went to the bathroom, and was coming back down the escalator to get my stuff. The keynote had not quite ended, and I was just gonna come in quietly, get my stuff and leave for good. And Rebecca was coming up the escalator, and we did not know each other at all. And she said to me, "You are missing a fantastic keynote." And I said, I left that keynote because it bothered me so much. And we, you know, we're passing this way, and we sort of look at each other as we're passing. And is that how you remember it too, Rebecca? That we were.
Oh, I do. Yeah, that's exactly how I remember it. And I thought, I have to get to the top of the escalator to run down and ask her about this because we had such totally different perceptions of the same event.
Yeah.
Go
And I
ahead.
remember thinking, wow, I could just keep walking and this would be the end of it. Or we could, or we could do this. We could try it. And I remember I had a little internal conversation with myself. Do I want to do this? I don't know. It might go really badly, but I had just come from recently a meditation retreat for people of color in the desert. It was called Loving Kindness in the Desert. And one of the things I had taken away from it was this desire to heal, to be a healing force in this world for our broken society. And I thought, here's an opportunity. It may not go well. And so that's funny, Rebecca. I remember going up the escalator to talk to you, but it doesn't matter what exactly happened. We both made that decision to.
You're right. You came up. You came up. Right. I turned around and said, "Have you got a minute?
Yeah.
You talk to me about this." And I waited at the top, and you came up.
And I remember that our conversation still was not comfortable. And you did mention, that you had a son-in-law who was Black. And so I said, well, do you think that your son-in-law could do what this guy was doing and not get arrested or worse in the first city that he tried to do this in? That's something that I do remember, but I don't remember the specifics so much, but I do remember more of that conflict in terms of I was stating my perspective and you were also sharing your perspective, and they just didn't overlap. But consciously still the entire time, I'm gonna get through this. We're gonna get to a point where we can leave and both feel good about this conversation. That was my intent anyway.
Right. And I remember breathing and thinking, I'm so grateful to this young woman for talking with me. Because, I can imagine she's thinking, what does this old woman want? But I really wanted to understand. I was so taken aback because I thought, okay, does that mean that because I'm Caucasian, I can't do these things, right?
Yeah.
It is a big issue in our, and I do remember us asking you that, like, then what do we that are white do? Because it is an issue in our church when we do Out of the Cold, right? It's almost all.
Yeah, you did say
white people.
I remember you saying, I'm a Christian and these are things I believe in, and I'm still gonna do this even if or I'm still gonna be kind. And I don't know how much we got into, even talking about him acknowledging his privilege, where he was, because that would go a huge way. If he had said, I understand that I am a white male and I am wealthy and that I have privileges that allow me to do this. I don't think we got into that level of the conversation then.
No.
But it was that idea of kindness existing in a vacuum. Like, let's just be kind and everything will be great. It's like, well, okay, but no, not really. Like, yes, I think we should all be kind.
Yes.
And so that particular meeting, so I'd love to hear how you thought about that in the coming months, because this was over a year ago now. Because for me, while it did, I think our conversation went well. We ended up hugging each other before we parted ways. And I remember thinking, though, if SLA brought the speaker to speak to the organization, and Rebecca Jones, and everybody knows the name Dysart and Jones, and so it was like, okay, to me, not knowing you, especially, just being like, well, you're a known entity in SLA, right? And so if you feel this way about the speaker, and SLA brought the speaker in, and I had such a different experience with it, organization, a place for me, do I belong here, or do I need to find myself another place?
So that was, I didn't just want to learn from my perspective. I wanted to learn from the association's perspective, because if a young professional feels like this, wow, okay. And obviously, I'm missing something, which I learn all the time from my son-in-law too, right? And I learned from my sister-in-law who is Asian, and that we have to start to put these pixels all together so we get the full picture, And so Shailoo, have you had experiences like that with people? I mean, you and I didn't have that type of experience because, of course, I'm totally out to lunch and didn't even realize that you were, as you say to me, you are a racialized minority. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm still learning.
Yeah, and sometimes the terminology is going to vary, and it's okay to ask what the preferred term is or how do you identify, because we have to be careful to not make the assumption that everybody identifies the same way with how they present. And I think a really important thing is just to get clear to ask. But I haven't had the experience that you and Jamie Lynn have had, which for me is the classic example of when you have two individuals who've had very different life experiences. And those life experiences have shaped your worldviews. And the way that you see the world, even though it's the exact same speaker at the same time and in the same place, that the interpretations are different because you're bringing to it your worldview and your lived experience. And unless we take the time to understand why does Jamie Lynn see this different from Rebecca Jones, then we miss out on that opportunity to learn. And what's really beautiful about your experience is neither of you came to it with the approach that one is right, one is wrong. And all too often, if we try to engage in this type of conversation, it can easily get into that tug of war of, I need to convince you that you're wrong. His message was excellent. It was about kindness. How could you disagree with that? That's not the approach that you brought to it. So there's something in that micro example that you have experienced that we need to pull out and engage with in a bigger way around inclusion, is to continually ask ourselves in those uncomfortable, in that discomfort, to be able to sit with that discomfort and be respectful to ask, how is that different for you? Tell me about that. Here's what it was for me. I'm still going to get an opportunity to talk about what I think. Just recognize that my worldview is going to be challenged. How do I need to breathe through that to hear the other perspective, another perspective, which is as important and equally valuable.
Right. You know, when you were just talking there, Shailoo, you used either the words or the expression about asking and questions 3 times. And that is so critical to any workplace is what we're supposed to be talking about, to be inclusive. People have to ask those questions, which people would even be uncomfortable. I mean, if I didn't know you as well as I do, I would be uncomfortable saying, how do you identify? Right? I probably would be, just because, well, I probably would be, because I don't want to offend anybody, right? That's where we are. And, but also taking the time to ask, the time to listen to the various answers, and as you said, sit in the discomfort.
Yeah, and getting away from that binary of right, wrong, good, bad, right? So, but all too often, especially in a workplace environment, I think we fall into that trap of what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, because certain types of behaviors get rewarded. So
Yeah.
a behavior that might respectfully challenge someone's worldview or the grand narrative within the organization are often seen as the trouble person, or they don't fit within the organizational culture that we're cultivating here. And either you get with the program or you'll be let go. And so all too often, many of us have had to, the phrase, toe the party line because of the fear, because of that power. So an organization that pulls back from that and says, no, this is what inclusion and acceptance is for us. And as long as it's done in a respectful way, dissent is okay. It's how we are going to learn. It's how we're going to grow our organization and be really successful, is by not having everybody fall into line with the exact same tagline.
Exactly. Exactly. So what would an inclusive workplace look like and feel like to you two?
I'll give you an example. There was a video welcoming our new president. And in the video was a clip of a staff member in our unit who's Black. And the way the video was shot made it look like he was a student and not actually an employee. The lens that my boss brings, because inclusion and acceptance is important to her and the work that she does with us around that, is she said, I wonder if he's okay with having his image in that video and that representation. She had the wherewithal to reach out to him and say, hey, did you notice that? He said, yes. And she said, are you okay with it? He said, I didn't know I had any other choice.
There you go.
She asked the question.
Yep.
She asked, she reached out. Was that video taken with your knowledge? Did anyone ask you if you could be presented in this welcome video? No. He said, I would never have raised it because I thought I had to accept it until you asked me.
Right.
She modeled that
Right.
curiosity and respect. And that for the rest of us in the organization to see, it sets a tone that when we're safe enough to come up and say what we're comfortable with or not with her, we're also okay to support our colleagues by asking the same questions because she models it. She doesn't just point to the policy that our university has around diversity, because you know what's happening there is falling into the measurable diversity. The campus picked that image because they wanted to show diversity in terms of color, ethnicity, race in this welcome video. But they missed a step. Is that how you want to be represented? That's not inclusion. Inclusion is not having diverse faces on a poster. Diversity and inclusion is about asking, do you want to have your image there? What do you want in terms of words around that image? Where would you like it presented?
Acceptance is so important when you are bringing, various stakeholders together, even on a plan. And so an inclusive workplace or an inclusive association to me is one where people understand that there's a whole bunch of ands that need to come together, that there is an invitation. I love that invitations need to be extended. We cannot just assume that people, right, get with the party, fit in. They're not the right fit. It's the invitation, it's the ask, it's the and, it's the acceptance.
So it's not just an invitation to participate, but to be a part of something, but an invitation to share actually how I feel about it and then have that be taken into consideration.
Yeah.
I think we keep saying invitation, invitation, and to me it's like, here, you're invited to my party, it's like, but whose party is it? And maybe I don't want to be invited to your party, maybe I want to throw the party with you. Idea of from that one step, beyond the invitation.
So I can't thank you two enough for your candor and bringing your brilliance to the screen, and also joining me for the next 10 minutes in some Q&A with people. And you did have to think about whether or not you'd be on a Zoom recording and session for an inclusive workplace. And I really appreciate the thought that you gave it. And just you know, putting yourselves out there, because that's what inclusivity is all about.
Cut. Thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca.